between 1890 and 1903, theologian Edgar Thornwell and student Nora Halloway documented their dark investigations on experimental videotapes. Decades later, those recordings were found corroded, incomplete, and disturbingly real. Each video on this channel is one of those restored tapes, unveiling mysteries that blur the lines between faith, science, and psychological horror. Welcome to the Thornwell Archives. The letter arrived upon a rainy Tuesday, delivered by a messenger who refused to cross the threshold of my dwelling. He left it upon the doorstep, sodden and stained with something brownish red. It was most assuredly not mud. Within the envelope, 3 lines written in tremulous ink. They are yet living. Imprisoned within, he hath placed them there. Come ere it be too late. Affixed thereto was a cutting from the Salisbury Times, dated the 12th of August. 27 persons disappeared in the environs of Salisbury these past 6. Investigate connection with rural proprietor. And a photograph. A young woman smiling beside a gentleman of middle years. Upon the reverse, inscribed by hand, Catherine Ashcroft, 1890. The first. I ought to have delivered the matter unto the constabulary, yet there was something in that photograph which disturbed me most profoundly. The woman's eyes, even in that grainy image, seemed to gaze directly upon me, as though beseeching aid across the gulf of time. I showed all to Nora that very afternoon. She studied the letter against the window light, noting the impressions of fingers pressed into the paper. Whosoever penned this had hands soiled with blood, she said with quiet composure, indicating the brown stains, and was seized with terror. See how the pen hath torn the paper here and here. Excessive pressure, extreme fear. 'Twas then we resolved to depart. We arrived at the Ashcroft Estate as evening fell upon the 14th of September. The earthen road leading to the main house was carpeted with dead leaves and something more. Footprints, dozens of them proceeding toward the property, yet none returning. The iron gate creaked upon its hinges, standing ajar like a mouth awaiting to devour visitors. The estate comprised 15 acres, enclosed by dense forest of ancient oaks. And then we beheld the garden. 27 human figures wrought in concrete, each standing 6 feet in height, scattered across the grounds in attitudes of absolute agony. These were not artistic sculptures. They were exact reproductions of persons in suffering. Arms raised as though to ward off some unseen terror. Mouths agape in screams that yet echoed silently. And the eyes, heaven preserve us, the eyes, appeared moist as though genuine tears were upon the verge of flowing. The groundskeeper, Thomas Grimsby, received us with a rifle clutched in trembling hands. He bore deep shadows beneath his eyes and the acrid scent of spirits about him. "Are you the investigators?" he inquired, lowering his weapon upon seeing Nora. He conducted us through the garden, pausing at each statue to murmur names. This be Margaret Thorne, seamstress of the village, vanished in March. This be Reverend William Carl. April. This be Thomas Jr., mine own nephew. May. His voice broke. The Master Ashcroft knew them all, every one. He would invite them to suppers, discourse, biblical studies, and then they would simply vanish, and a new statue would appear in the garden come the morrow. Nora photographed each statue whilst Grimsby spoke. I recorded all particulars, names, dates, details. When we came upon the first statue, positioned at the garden centre, Grimsby fell to his knees and began to weep. Catherine, my sister, his wife, he declared she had taken ill, that she had perished of fever. But 3 days hence, this thing stood here, gazed upon the statue. The countenance was hers, precisely as in the photograph, yet the expression was one of pure terror. And then I noticed something which froze my very blood. The statue was warm. I placed my hand upon the concrete and felt it. Heat, pulsation, as though there was something alive within. Good evening, or good morrow. I know not what hour it be where you find yourself presently, but I do sincerely hope, most sincerely hope, that it be daylight. What you're about to hear is not a tale. It is not entertainment. This is tape number 1, recovered in the year of our Lord, 1994, from a metal box interred beneath the cellar of my former residence in Providence, Rhode Island. My name was Edgar Thornwell, and if you are hearing this, it signifies that I have failed to destroy these recordings as I ought to have done. Before we proceed, I must needs ask something essential of you. Subscribe to this channel. Not for my sake, not for morbid curiosity, but because what is documented upon these tapes must be known, studied, prevented from occurring again. Leave a like if you believe there exist evils in this world which transcend human comprehension, yet must still be combated. And I beseech ye, comment below from which country and city you are watching. I must know how far these recordings have traveled. I must know if there be other investigators who might continue the work which Nora and I commenced. The Ashcroft Estate lies in the outskirts of Salisbury, England, a region known for Stonehenge and for centuries of forgotten pagan practices. When Nora and I arrived there in September of 1891, we expected to encounter a lunatic, perhaps a common murderer. We were not prepared for what we truly found. 27 real persons disappeared over the course of 6 months, all acquainted with Leonard Ashcroft, and all yet living. Imprisoned within shells of concrete, conscious, suffering. Leonard Ashcroft was a man of respect, a retired professor of Latin, recently widowed, an active member of the local parish. None suspected him. Yet at some juncture betwixt the death of his wife Catherine and the commencement of 1891, something altered. He discovered something, or something discovered him, and he began a ritual requiring living sacrifices, not deaths, imprisonments. Each person sealed within concrete, maintained alive through means which defy all medical or scientific logic. And the first victim was his own wife. This recording was made upon the night of September the 14th, 1891, shortly before the midnight hour. What you shall hear in the hours hence is the complete documentation of the 5 most disturbing days of my life. Some portions of the tape have been damaged by the passage of time. Others were damaged by something I cannot explain. Where there be silence, know that something was lost or removed. By mine own hand or by forces beyond my control. Now, if you are truly prepared, and I doubt most sincerely that you are, let us commence. We departed from London upon the morning of September the 13th aboard a train which rattled so violently that Nora was obliged to cradle her Kodak camera upon her lap throughout the entire journey. She sat restless, leafing through her notebook of annotations, reviewing the cases of disappearance we had managed to compile ere our departure. Edgar, every one of them was personally acquainted with Ashcroft. These are not random victims. He selected them. I perused the letter for the 10th time, concentrating upon that phrase, "They are yet living." Living. Not deceased and transformed into statues, but living within them. The implication was impossible, and yet something within me knew it to be truth. We arrived at Salisbury Station at 40 minutes past 3 o'clock in the afternoon. A man awaited us, gaunt, begrimed, reeking of spirits. He clutched a placard bearing my name inscribed in tremulous letters. He offered no introduction, merely beckoned that we follow him unto a wagon drawn by a skeletal horse. Throughout the 40-minute journey, he uttered not a single word. Nora attempted conversation. He merely shook his head and lashed the horse with greater vigor. When we espied the iron gate of the Ashcroft Estate, he halted abruptly, pointed toward the road ahead, and spoke but once. "They scream in the night hours. You may hear them if you remain silent." Ere we could inquire further, he had already departed. The estate proved larger and more forbidding than I had imagined. The principal house was of Victorian construction, with bricks darkened by moisture and windows bearing torn curtains that swayed like burial shrouds. Yet what dominated the landscape was the garden. 27 human figures wrought in concrete, scattered in an imperfect circular pattern. Even from a distance, I could discern these were not abstract sculptures. They were exact replicas of real persons. Every anatomical detail preserved, wrinkles upon the fingers, veins in the neck, even the textures of garments. Nora halted beside me, camera forgotten in her hands. "Edgar, they are looking upon us." I wished to say 'twas optical illusion, but I could not, for she spoke true. All 27 heads were turned in our direction. Thomas Grimsby received us at the door with a rifle in hand. He appeared some 50 years of age, with disheveled grey locks and eyes reddened from recent weeping. "Be you the investigators to whom I dispatched the letter?" He had not sent the letter, or at least possessed no recollection of having done so. Yet we permitted him to believe thus. Grimsby conducted us within. The house bore the odor of mildew, burnt candles, and something metallic which I recognized immediately. Blood. Not fresh, but permeated into the timbers, the walls, the very air. He would bring them hither, Grimsby said, gesturing toward the principal hall. Suppers, discourse, and then, in the dead of night, I would hear screaming. But when I descended, I would find only Ashcroft, covered in concrete dust, declaring he was laboring upon a new peace. Nora commenced exploring, whilst I conversed with Grimsby. Her footsteps echoed upon the upper floor. Grimsby offered me tea, yet his hands trembled so violently that the cup rattled against the saucer. I seated myself at the table and opened my field journal. Master Grimsby, I must needs have you recount everything from the beginning. When did your sister perish? He drew a deep breath as though confessing a mortal sin. February of 1891. Catherine took ill most suddenly. High fever, delirium. Leonard would permit none to see her, not even a physician. He insisted he was tending to her. 3 days hence he announced she had expired. Yet there was no funeral, no body, only that statue in the garden. And you found this not peculiar? I inquired. Grimsby covered his face with his hands. I was in mourning. I could not think properly, and Leonard was my brother-in-law, a man of respect. How could I accuse him of what? Of transforming my sister into stone? He laughed bitterly. But then the other persons began to vanish, always after visiting Leonard, always followed by a new statue in the garden. And then I heard. He ceased trembling. Heard what? I pressed. Grimsby looked upon me with eyes wide, brimming with tears. I heard my sister screaming from within the statue in the night hours, calling my name. Nora descended the stairs at that moment, pale of countenance, bearing something in her hands. A book, bound in black leather, with symbols engraved upon the cover which I did not recognize. Edgar. I discovered this in his bedchamber. Upon the floor, beside the bed, as though it had fallen and he had not perceived it. I opened the tome. The pages were of ancient parchment, yellowed, inscribed in medieval Latin commingled with something more ancient, possibly Aramaic. Yet there were annotations in the margins, in modern English, bearing Ashcroft's hand, and one phrase underlined thrice. Virginti septem anime vivae in petra clause portum aperient. Ultima familia esse debat. 27 living souls sealed in stone shall open the portal. The last must be of the family. A portal unto what realm? Nora whispered. I continued reading. Ashcroft's annotations described an ancient demonic ritual practiced by Roman cultists in the 3rd century. They believed that certain demons, entities inhabiting the space betwixt life and death, could be summoned through the prolonged suffering of living victims. Not swift death, but eternal imprisonment. Consciousness preserved within inert matter. And 27 was the sacred number. 27 imprisoned souls, screaming in perpetual agony, would create a resonance that would open a fissure between worlds. Yet the 7th and 20th had to be special. It had to be someone beloved by the invoker. He employed his own wife, I murmured, horrified. Catherine was the first, because the ritual demanded personal sacrifice. He loved her, and yet he imprisoned her. Grimsby was now sobbing, kneeling upon the floor. She is yet there, yet living, All of them are. I hear them in the night hours, 27 voices screaming, beseeching to be liberated. Nora grasped my hand, squeezing firmly. Edgar, we must extract them from there. We must shatter them. I shook my head. If we break the statues and they are yet living, but fused with the concrete, I know not what shall transpire. They may perish, or worse. Yet we had no choice. Grimsby led us unto the cellar of the house, where Ashcroft maintained his tools. Sledgehammers, chisels, saws, and something more. Plaster moulds, dozens of them scattered upon the floor. Moulds of faces, hands, entire bodies. Nora photographed everything, whilst I examined the workbench. There were syringes, vials of unknown liquids, and the laboratory notebook. I opened it upon the final page. The entry was dated the 10th of September, 4 days ere we arrived. The 7th and 20th is complete. Catherine rests at the centre, where all commenced. Now I need only wait. The portal shall open upon the full moon of September, 3 nights from this day. And then, finally, I shall behold what lies upon the other side. I looked upon Nora. The full moon is upon the morrow night. Night descended upon the Ashcroft Estate like a heavy pall. Edgar assembled the phonograph in the principal hall, whilst I positioned my camera at the window, focusing upon the garden. The 27 statues were pale shadows beneath the waxing moonlight. Grimsby secured himself in the rear annex, refusing to remain in the main house. "They speak more loudly when strangers are present," he said ere departing. Edgar commenced recording at 13 minutes past 10 o'clock, his voice steady yet tense. I lit 3 candles and positioned them about the hall, and then we waited. At 47 minutes past 10 o'clock, we heard the first sound. 'Twas not the wind, 'twas not an animal, 'twas human. A low moan muffled, emanating from without. Edgar seized his oil lantern and went unto the window. I followed, camera in hand. The moaning continued, constant, like someone attempting to scream through a gag. Edgar directed the lantern toward the garden. The statues remained motionless, yet the sound was coming from them, from within them. Edgar whispered, "Note the hour." 10:47. First vocal manifestation confirmed. At 15 minutes past 11 o'clock, the moan was accompanied by others. 2, then 3, then a dozen. A chorus of muffled voices, distorted, screaming in agony. I covered mine ears, but 'twas of no avail. The sound penetrated, echoed within my very skull. Edgar ran to the phonograph and adjusted the receiver, attempting to capture the voices. Yet the wax cylinder began to crack, unable to withstand the frequencies. "'Tis not possible," Edgar murmured. "The frequencies are beyond the normal audible spectrum. Yet still, we are hearing them." He looked upon me, and I beheld genuine fear in his eyes for the first time. We resolved to venture forth. I know it appears madness to go forth toward the screaming, yet we required photographic evidence. We required proof. Edgar took his lantern and a heavy chisel. I carried my camera and magnesium flash. We opened the front door and stepped into the cold night. The screams grew louder, clearer, and then, as we walked toward the nearest statue, they transformed into words. "Help, I beseech thee. It pains. I cannot breathe." The first statue we reached was of a young man, perhaps in his 20th year, with hands raised in supplication. Edgar brought the lantern near unto the concrete face, and then we beheld it. The eyes moved, imperceptibly, yet they moved, following the light. I nearly dropped my camera. Edgar placed his hand upon the concrete and whispered, "Canst thou hear me?" The statue did not respond verbally, yet the screams surrounding us intensified, as though all the others were responding in its stead. I. Edgar positioned the chisel at the statue's base. I shall attempt to break it. If thou art yet living within, make some sign. We waited, and then slowly, one of the statue's fingers, the index finger of the right hand, moved. Merely 1/2 centimeter, yet it moved. Edgar looked upon me, horrified. They are conscious, fully conscious, trapped, paralyzed, yet living. He raised the chisel, prepared to strike. Yet ere he could, we heard a voice behind us, calm, polite. "I should not do that, were I you." We turned. A man stood some 30 feet distant, partially illuminated by the moon. Tall, lean, some 50 years of age, attired in a dark suit covered with white dust. Leonard Ashcroft. He smiled. "You must be the investigators. Thomas spoke of you. Welcome unto my work." Edgar directed the lantern upon him. "You are imprisoning living persons within concrete. This is torture. This is murder." Ashcroft shook his head calmly. "'Tis not murder if they are yet living, Master Thornwell. And 'tis not torture, 'tis transcendence." He began walking toward us, hands in his pockets, completely at ease. "You comprehend not what I am accomplishing here. You comprehend not the magnitude. For centuries, mankind has sought contact with the divine, or the infernal, depending upon one's perspective. Yet all have failed because they understood not the price. 'Tis not blood that opens portals. 'Tis not death. 'Tis conscious and prolonged suffering. 'Tis the agony of a soul trapped betwixt life and death, screaming through the veil." Edgar raised the chisel as a weapon. "You are mad." Ashcroft laughed. "Mad. I liberated my wife, Master Thornwell. Catherine was dying of the cancer. 3 months of agony awaiting her. So I offered her an alternative, to become part of something greater. She consented, and when I sealed her within the first statue, when I heard her first scream, I felt it. I felt the veil tearing. I felt something upon the other side responding. So I continued. 27 souls. 27 voices screaming in unison. And upon the morrow, at the full moon, the portal shall open, and I shall behold God, or the devil, or whatsoever awaits upon the other side." Edgar ran toward him, chisel raised. Yet Ashcroft proved swifter. He drew something from his pocket, a syringe, and plunged it into Edgar's neck ere I could react. Edgar staggered, falling to his knees. I screamed, running to aid him. Yet Ashcroft seized me by the arm with surprising strength. "You shall be the 8th and 20th Miss Halloway. Not Catherine, not I. You, an investigator. One who came seeking truth. One who shall be the perfect witness unto what is to come." I struggled, kicked, screamed. Yet he was strong, and the world began to darken. The last thing I heard ere I swooned was Edgar calling my name, and the screams of the 27 statues, now singing in chorus. I awakened, with my head throbbing, lying upon the cold cellar floor. My hands were bound behind my back with wire. I attempted to move, yet every muscle ached. Whatsoever Ashcroft had injected into me yet remained in my system, rendering me slow, confused. I forced mine eyes to focus. Nora lay some feet distant from me, unconscious, likewise bound. Yet there was something more. Surrounding her, a plaster mold. Large, the size of a human body, and beside it, buckets of concrete yet wet. "Ah, you have awakened." Ashcroft's voice echoed through the cellar. He stood at a workbench, mixing something in a bucket. "Excellent. I desired that you bear witness. After all, you are a man of science, Master Thornwell. You shall appreciate the methodology." He turned, holding a larger syringe filled with transparent liquid. "This is the secret. A compound of mine own creation. It paralyzes the body completely, yet maintains consciousness intact. The person cannot move, cannot scream, yet feels everything. And when the concrete is poured about them, when it hardens, they become trapped, living, conscious, forever." I struggled against my bonds, feeling the wire cutting into my flesh. "You cannot do this. She hath naught to do with your mad ritual." Ashcroft knelt beside me, regarding me with something resembling pity. "But she hath everything to do with it. She came seeking. She chose to be here, just as Catherine chose, just as all the others. They came unto me, Master Thornwell, invited, curious, seeking something, and I gave unto them purpose. I transformed their insignificant lives into part of something transcendental." Nora moaned, beginning to stir. Ashcroft rose and went unto her, caressing her hair gently. "Fear not, my dear. 'Twill be swift. First the injection, then the mold, then the concrete. You shall feel the cold spreading about your body. You shall feel the weight. And then, when it hardens, you shall feel the prison. Yet you shall not perish. Your heart shall continue beating. Your lungs shall continue attempting to draw breath, though air shall be scarce. And your mind shall remain perfectly clear. And you shall scream, within, where none can hear, save I, and whatsoever lies upon the other side." Nora opened her eyes, focusing upon Ashcroft, and then, to my astonishment, she spat in his face. "Go unto hell." Ashcroft wiped his face calmly, smiling. "I shall, Miss Halloway, upon the morrow night, when the portal opens, and I shall take all of you with me." He raised the syringe. Nora struggled, yet was bound too tightly. I cried out, attempting to rise, and then suddenly we heard it, pounding from above, from the ground floor. Ashcroft halted, frowning. "Grimsby!" The pounding continued, louder, more insistent. And then, a voice, multiple voices, the screams of the statues, now amplified, echoing through the walls of the house. Ashcroft dropped the syringe and ran up the stairs. The moment he departed, I began working at my bonds. The wire was cutting into my flesh, blood flowing, yet I continued. Nora whispered, "Edgar, the pocket of my coat. There is a small blade for cutting photographic negatives. Take it." I managed to roll unto her, turning my back. My fingers found the pocket, the blade, small yet sharp. I commenced cutting the wire. It required 3 minutes, 3 eternal minutes. Yet finally I freed myself. Swiftly I cut Nora's bonds. She rose unsteady. "We must depart." "Now," I nodded. Yet then I looked upon the buckets of concrete, upon the molds, upon the tools, and a terrible notion occurred unto me. "Nora, what if we employ the very ritual against him?" She regarded me, confused. I explained swiftly. "The ritual requires 27 living souls imprisoned. Yet Ashcroft is not counting himself. He believes he shall be the witness, the invoker. But what if we make him the 8th and 20th? If we imprison him, conscious, at the center of the circle, the ritual would be completed. yet with him as the final victim. Nora grew pale. Edgar, that is torture. I grasped her shoulders. He had tortured 27 persons, including his own wife, including Grimsby's nephew. He deserves it. Nora hesitated, and then nodded. We ascended the stairs silently. Ashcroft stood in the hall, gazing through the window onto the garden. The statues were moving. Not much. Merely small adjustments, heads turning, fingers contracting, yet moving. "They are growing stronger," Ashcroft murmured, awestruck. "The full moon is feeding them. Upon the morrow, 'twill be glorious." I approached from behind him, grasping one of the heavy sledgehammers Grimsby had left. "You speak truly, Ashcroft. Upon the morrow, 'twill be glorious, yet not in the manner you imagine." He turned, yet not in time. I struck the sledgehammer against his head, not forcefully enough to slay him, merely to stun him. He fell, groaning. Nora seized the syringe he had left upon the table. "Is this it? The paralyzing compound?" I nodded. She looked upon Ashcroft, then upon me. "Are you certain?" I was not, yet we beheld no other option. "Do it." Nora injected the compound into Ashcroft's neck. He writhed for some seconds, and then became completely motionless, only his eyes moving, wide with terror, comprehending what was about to transpire. And then we dragged his paralyzed body onto the garden, onto the center of the circle, where Catherine, his wife, awaited in her concrete tomb. Dragging Ashcroft's paralyzed body through the garden proved the most disturbing thing I have ever done. He was conscious. I could perceive it in his eyes. Absolute terror, comprehension of what we were about to do. Yet he could not move, could not scream. Only watch whilst we conveyed him unto the center of the circle of statues, where his wife Catherine remained, the first victim, frozen in eternal agony. Edgar brought the buckets of concrete from the cellar. I brought the molds and tools, and Grimsby, who had emerged from the annex upon hearing the tumult, merely watched in silence, tears streaming down his face. "Are you certain of this?" Grimsby inquired, his voice hoarse. Edgar looked upon the 27 statues surrounding us, upon the faces frozen in torment, upon Catherine at the center. "He did this unto his own wife, unto your nephew, unto 25 other innocent persons. I am certain." Grimsby nodded slowly, and then, to my surprise, he knelt beside Ashcroft and whispered, "This is for Catherine, for Thomas, for all of them," and he spat in his face. We positioned Ashcroft upright, bound to a wooden frame Edgar improvised. His eyes followed our every movement, beseeching silently. Yet there was no mercy in me, not after beholding what he had wrought, not after hearing the screams of the victims, yet living, yet conscious, imprisoned for months. Edgar commenced applying the plaster mold about Ashcroft's body, layer upon layer, covering his torso, his arms, his legs, leaving only the face exposed, for now. Whilst Edgar labored, I read the ritual book we had discovered. We needed to comprehend what would transpire when the 8th and 20th soul was added. The description was vague, written in archaic Latin, commingled with symbols I could not fully decipher. Yet one thing was clear. When the circle was completed, when the 8th and 20th soul screamed in unison with the other 7th and 20th, something would respond. A portal would open, not unto this world, but unto something beyond, something that had been waiting, watching, hungering. "Edgar," I called, showing him the passage. "It states here that the portal shall open at the circle's center, where Catherine stands, and whosoever is nearest shall be consumed first. Edgar ceased his labour, looking upon the book, then upon Catherine, then upon Ashcroft. Then he shall be first, as it should be. He continued applying the plaster. The statues surrounding us began to move more visibly now, heads turning to observe, arms contracting slightly, and the screams, those muffled, distorted screams, intensified. When the plaster had hardened sufficiently, Edgar commenced pouring the concrete, first about Ashcroft's feet, then ascending the legs, then the torso. I watched Ashcroft's eyes. They were wide, tears streaming. He was attempting to scream, yet the paralyzing compound prevented any sound. Only his eyes moved, frantically, beseeching. Edgar continued, relentless. The concrete ascended the neck, and then, finally, covered the face. Only the eyes remained visible for some seconds more, and then, naught. Only a new statue, the 8th and 20th. In the moment the concrete completely covered Ashcroft, something altered. The other statues ceased moving. The screams stopped. For a moment, there was only silence, absolute silence. And then, from within Catherine's statue, at the circle's center, we heard it. A voice, clear, calm, relieved. I thank thee. Grimsby fell to his knees, sobbing. Catherine, Catherine, is it thou? The voice responded, faint yet audible. Thomas, my brother, 'tis ended, finally, 'tis ended. One by one, the other statues began to speak, voices weak, exhausted, yet relieved. I thank thee, finally. Edgar looked upon me, eyes wide. They are dying. Finally they can die. And 'twas truth. We could feel it. Something was changing. The energy that had kept those souls trapped, conscious, suffering for months, was dissipating. They were being released, not unto this world, but unto the next, unto wherever souls journey when they finally find rest. Yet then, from the circle's center, where Ashcroft was now sealed, we heard it, a scream, not muffled, not distorted, clear and loud, a scream of pure, absolute agony that echoed through the night. And then the ground began to crack. Fissures spread from the circle's center, radiating like spider webs, and from within the fissures, light. Not the sickly green light we had beheld before, but something darker, red, pulsating, alive. Edgar pulled me backward. The portal. 'Tis opening, yet 'twas not as Ashcroft had imagined. 'Twas not a door unto knowledge. 'Twas not transcendence. 'Twas hunger. I could feel it. Something upon the other side, something ancient and monstrous, was reaching through the fissures, attempting to enter, and the only thing preventing it was Ashcroft's scream, the 8th and 20th soul, trapped, conscious, suffering. He had become the lock, the prison that kept the portal sealed, and so long as he suffered, so long as his consciousness remained imprisoned within that concrete, screaming in eternal agony, the portal would never fully open. He had achieved his ritual, yet he would not be the witness. He would be the final sacrifice. The fissures in the ground ceased expanding. The pulsating red light began to diminish, like a wound slowly closing. And the screams of the 7 and 20 imprisoned souls began to fade, one by one, like candles being extinguished. First Catherine's voice, then the others. Final words of gratitude, of relief, of peace. Grimsby knelt upon the ground, praying aloud, tears flowing ceaselessly.
Nora held my hand, squeezing firmly, and I merely observed, attempting to process what we had wrought. When the final scream disappeared, the statues began to crack, not violently, but gently, like eggshells breaking. Pieces of concrete fell, revealing what lay within. I expected to find bodies, preserved corpses. Yet there was naught, only dust, fine white ash, which dispersed upon the night wind. The souls had departed, and the bodies had disintegrated the moment they were finally liberated. 27 piles of ash, 27 persons who could finally rest. Only one statue remained intact, the 8th and 20th Ashcroft. I approached it slowly, placing my hand upon the yet wet concrete. 'Twas warm, pulsating, as though there were a heart beating within. And then I heard it, faint, muffled, yet unmistakable. A scream. Ashcroft was alive, conscious, trapped, and would be forevermore. So long as he remained there suffering, the portal would remain sealed. He had become the very lock that contained the evil. Should we break it? Nora inquired, gazing upon the statue. I pondered for a long moment. Part of me, the rational, scientific part, said I, that no human being, regardless how monstrous, deserved to suffer eternally. Yet the other part, the part that had heard the victim's screams, that had witnessed the suffering he inflicted, said nay. If we break it, the portal opens, and whatsoever lies upon the other side, we cannot risk it. Nora nodded slowly. Grimsby looked upon Ashcroft's statue and spat upon the ground. Let him rot therein. We spent the remainder of the night documenting everything. Nora photographed the piles of ash where the statues had stood. I recorded audio accounts describing every particular. Grimsby collected Catherine's ashes in an urn, vowing to give her proper burial. And when the sun began to rise at 42 minutes past 5 o'clock, we looked upon the garden one final time. Only one statue remained, solitary, at the center of a circle of ashes, a monument to suffering and a warning. Ere we departed, Grimsby delivered unto us something, a sealed envelope. I discovered this in Ashcroft's study. 'Twas hidden in a secret drawer. I believe you ought to have it. I opened the envelope. Within was a map. Markings at various locations around the world. Paris, Rome, Istanbul, Cairo, Kyoto. And beside each marking, a number, 7 and 20. There are more, Grimsby said, his voice trembling. Ashcroft was not laboring alone. He was part of something greater, a network, a cult. Nora took the map, studying the markings. Edgar, behold. Each location had 7 and 20 marked beside it. 7 and 20 souls. 7 and 20 statues. They are replicating the ritual throughout the world. I felt a chill course through my spine. How many locations are marked? Nora counted. Her voice grew weak. 7 and 20. 7 and 20 rituals. 7 and 20 portals. And if each one were completed, I could not finish the thought. Grimsby accompanied us onto the wagon. He appeared 10 years older than when we had arrived. What shall you do? He inquired. I looked upon Nora. She looked upon me, and both of us knew the answer. We shall stop them. All of them. One by one, if necessary. Grimsby nodded. May God bless you, and protect you from what you shall encounter. We boarded the wagon, and as we departed, I looked back one final time. The Ashcroft Estate, now silent, peaceful, save for the single statue at the garden center, screaming forevermore in the darkness. Upon the train returning to London, Nora and I studied the map. The next marked location was Paris, the catacombs. There is an annotation here, Nora said, pointing. Le 27 os, commencé en mars 1891, presque complet. The 7 and 20 bones, commenced in March 1891, nearly complete. My blood froze. If it commenced in March, 6 months have already passed. It may be nearly finished. Nora closed the map, determination in her eyes. Then we must be swifter. As the train cut through the English countryside, I assembled the phonograph one final time and recorded my concluding observations. Tape number 1, conclusion. Ashcroft Estate. The ritual was interrupted. 7 and 20 souls were liberated. An 8th and 20th was imprisoned. The invoker himself, Leonard Ashcroft, now serving as the lock for the portal he attempted to open. Yet we have discovered something worse. This was not an isolated incident. There are others. 7 and 20 locations around the world. 7 and 20 attempts to open portals unto something that ought not exist in our world. Nora and I shall investigate each one. We shall stop them, or perish in the attempt. I paused the recording, and then added in a low voice, "May God aid us, for none other can." 5 days following our return to London, a raven alighted upon my lodging house window. 'Twas not uncommon. Ravens are abundant in London. Yet this one was different. It bore something tied to its leg, a small metal cylinder. I opened it with trembling hands. Within, a rolled note, written in antique French. Vous avez fermé une porte. Mai 26 reste ouverte. Les catacombes pleurent, les os se souviennent. Venez vite, ou ils seront perdus à jamais. You have closed one door, but 6 and 20 remain open. The catacombs weep, the bones remember. Come swiftly, or they shall be lost forever. I showed the note to Nora that very evening. She read it thrice, her countenance growing increasingly pale. Edgar, how do they know? How do they know we were at Ashcroft? How do they know we are investigating? I had no answer. Yet one thing was clear. We were not dealing merely with isolated lunatics. There was an organization, a network, and they were observing us. They knew our movements, they knew our names, and somehow they were guiding us. But unto what end? To impede us, or to employ us? Edgar commenced packing immediately. I took my camera and inspected the film rolls. We possessed photographic evidence from Ashcroft, proof that something impossible had transpired. Yet whilst I organized the negatives, I noticed something disturbing. In one of the photographs, that taken at the moment when the statues began to crack, there was a figure in the background, standing at the forest's edge, observing, a human figure, yet with face obscured by shadows. And in its hand, it held something, a raven, the same raven that had brought the note. Someone was orchestrating everything, and we were dancing precisely as planned. Yet we had no choice. Paris awaited, and 6 and 20 souls needed to be saved.